It was a rare, foggy morning in Seattle, the mist that wrapped the city in secrecy and softened even its sharpest edges. Pike Street usually hummed with its endless rhythm espresso machines, hissing in corner cafes, buses, sighing steam as they braked, and pedestrians flowing like an impatient tide. Yet that morning felt slower, cloaked in a quiet, expectant hush, as though the city had conspired to witness what was about to unfold. Amara Johnson stood at the bus stop with her 6-year-old daughter, Lila. The girl was a bright burst of yellow in her sunshine dress, curls tumoring around her small face as she clutched a thick library book titled, "How to Build a Robot Dog." She bounced on her toes with the restless energy of a child who had not yet learned to wait. Amara's hand was firm around her daughter's, though her mind was far from that curb. In exactly 45 minutes, she would be in the sleek offices of Novaray Tech, preparing to pitch a deal that could alter the trajectory of her company forever. AeonSense AI. A project once dreamt of by her late mentor was on the brink of acquisition, and Amara intended to secure it. And yet here she was, waiting for a bus instead of sliding behind the wheel of her electric BMW parked in the garage. A deliberate choice. She wanted Lila to learn humility, to understand that convenience was not a birthright. "Mommy." Lila tugged at her sleeve, her voice cutting through the fog. "Look, over there." Amara followed her daughter's gaze. On a bench just beyond the stop sat a man, slumped, unshaven, dressed in mismatched layers that looked scavenged from donation bins. He resembled the city's forgotten one of those drifting souls Seattle's gray winters often swallowed. A knit cap shadowed his face, his posture heavy with the exhaustion no sleep could cure. "Don't stare, baby," Amara whispered, giving Lila's hand a reassuring squeeze. But Lila's eyes were wide, her voice insistent. "Mommy, that's Daddy." Amara froze. Her breath caught sharp and involuntary. She blinked as though the fog itself had played a trick. "What did you say?" "That's my Daddy," Lila repeated, certainty shining in her young voice. "I saw his photo." For a second, the world tilted. Amara's heart stumbled into a rhythm she hadn't known in years. 6 years to be precise, the night of the accident. The night her memory betrayed her. The night she brought Lila into this world alone. Her daughter's father was nothing more than a faceless shadow she had locked away behind walls of pain. She crouched before Lila, smoothing her curls with trembling fingers. "Sweetheart, we don't know that man. It's just a coincidence." But Lila, stubborn in that way only children could be, slipped her backpack open and pulled out a crumpled photo she had been hiding. She held it up with triumph. Amara's breath lodged in her throat. The man in the photograph, clean-shaven, sharply dressed, eyes full of purpose, was the image of the one slumped on the bench. The resemblance was undeniable, terrifying. Her pulse raced. Her lips parted, but no words came. She was not a woman easily shaken. Boardrooms had seen her dismantle rivals with the precision of a surgeon. Yet she stood undone by a child's conviction and a stranger's face. Amara rose slowly, each movement heavy with disbelief. She took a step toward the man. "Sir." Her voice wavered, but held a quiet authority. The man stirred faintly but did not look up. "Excuse me," she pressed. "Are you Henry?" At the sound of the name, though she herself did not know why that name had fallen from her lips, he raised his head. His eyes met hers. Blue-gray, distant, yet achingly familiar. Eyes that carried storms. I don't know," he murmured hoarsely. Amara's chest constricted. "You don't know your name?" He shook his head slowly. "I woke up in Harborview Hospital 5 years ago after an accident. No ID, no memory. Just this jacket." Lila broke free from her mother's grasp and rushed forward, flinging her tiny arms around the man. "Daddy." The man froze. His hands hovered awkwardly in the air, caught between instinct and fear. His face twisted with confusion. "I don't understand," he whispered. "It's okay, Daddy," Lila said, her voice brimming with innocent certainty. "You're home now." Amara felt her world spin. Logic screamed that this was impossible. Yet her daughter had never clung to a stranger before, never spoken of her father with such certainty. Could it be? The man looked like the photograph. The timeline matched. Her heart, traitorous and trembling, whispered one word. "Yes." She inhaled sharply, bracing herself. "Come with us." Amara's home perched high on Queen Anne Hill, a haven of glass and steel, overlooking the glittering water of Puget Sound. It was a place of curated silence, where order reigned and the world's chaos remained firmly outside the panoramic windows. Now the sanctuary had been invaded by a stranger, or perhaps a ghost of her past. Henry, who claimed not to know himself, sat uneasily on the leather sofa, shoulders hunched, a fresh white shirt clinging too crisply to his frame. He looked human again, though the shadows of the street still clung to him. Lila flitted around him like a firefly, giggling as she showed him how the smart thermostat obeyed her every command. "Look, Daddy, warm." Cold. Warm again. Amara watched from the kitchen island, her heart a tangle of reason and longing. She pressed her phone to her ear, her voice steady, though her soul was not. "Dr. Chen." "Yes. I need a paternity test. Urgently." Later, when he emerged from the guest bathroom freshly shaved, Amara's breath caught. Beneath the grime, he was striking. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, and a faint scar just under his left brow. A face that could have been on magazine covers, boardroom posters, or memories she could not retrieve. "Thank you," he said awkwardly, standing in the hallway, as though unsure if he belonged. "For what?" "For letting me stay. For feeding me. For treating me like I matter." Amara swallowed hard. Her walls were steel forged by years of single motherhood and corporate warfare. Yet his words chipped at them with disarming precision. "You may be my daughter's father," she said finally, her tone measured. "I don't know yet. But she believes you are. And that's enough. For now." Their eyes locked. For a fleeting second, something sparked recognition, or perhaps the ghost of a love she had once known, but could not recall. The results came swiftly. "Henry Walker is the biological father of Lila Johnson," Dr. Chen's voice declared over the phone. Amara's fingers trembled around the device. She sank into her office chair, her eyes filling with tears she had sworn she'd never shed again. Somewhere deep inside she had known. Memory loss might have stolen the past, but blood had not lied. When she looked up, Henry stood in the doorway. His eyes searched hers, fragile with hope and terror. "Is it true?" he asked. Amara nodded, unable to speak. He staggered back a step. "But how? Who was I? What did I do?" She rose, her voice breaking like glass. "You were a man I once trusted. I don't know why anymore." The rain had lifted by dawn, leaving Seattle's skyline washed clean, its towers glittering as though dipped in silver. From Amara Johnson's glass-walled kitchen, the view stretched across Puget Sound to where ferries carved white paths in the water. But Amara hardly saw any of it. Her attention was fixed on the man standing uncertainly at her counter, sleeves rolled, frying eggs, as if cooking was a rediscovery ritual. Ethan Walker. The name still felt foreign on her tongue. Even after Dr. Chen's voice had confirmed the truth, She both dreaded and longed for this man was Lila's father. Now he stood in her kitchen, as though he belonged a paradox of familiarity and strangeness. "Lila likes them sunny side up, right?" he asked without looking at her. Amara stiffened. "How would you know?" He froze mid-motion. The spatula trembled in his hand. I don't. It just felt right." She wanted to scoff, but the sincerity in his voice disarmed her. She crossed her arms, watching him with a scrutiny sharper than any investor ever received in her boardroom. Lila patted in curls, bouncing book in hand. She clambered onto a stool with the ease of one who already trusted him more than she should. "Morning, Daddy," she sang. Ethan blinked. That word still startled him, left him raw with wonder and fear. He set a plate before her. The little girl grinned. "Perfect. How I like it." Amara's gaze snapped to Ethan. His shoulders sagged in relief, as if a verdict had been delivered in his favor. Later that morning, as Ethan walked Lila to her school a few blocks away, Amara followed at a distance. She told herself it was for Lila's safety, but she was watching him, the way he stooped to hear every word Lila chattered. He stopped at a crosswalk, instinctively placing his arm across her small shoulders like a shield. He did not look like a stranger then, and that terrified her more than anything. The days blurred into a rhythm that unsettled Amara more than chaos ever had. Ethan began to settle into their lives like a puzzle piece, sliding back where it had always belonged. He cooked breakfasts clumsy, but earnest. He learned how Lila's robot dog project consumed her imagination. He even repaired the leaky faucet Amara had ignored for months. Yet when night fell, she often found him alone on the balcony, staring at the city lights, with an expression that carried both awe and ache. One evening she stepped outside with 2 mugs of tea. "You overthink," she said softly, handing him one. He smiled, faintly, eyes still on the horizon. "I'm trying to remember who I was, but sometimes I wonder if that even matters." The confession pierced her. She had spent years burying her own past, yet here he was stripped of his yearning for even fragments. "Maybe who you are now is enough," she murmured, before retreating inside, heart hammering at the intimacy of her own words. But the past refused to stay silent. One afternoon, Ethan's hands began to shake while tinkering with Lila's half-built drone. A memory burst unbidden. A boardroom washed in sterile blue light. A contract spread like a trap. A voice urgent and desperate. "Ethan, don't sign that." The memory dissolved as quickly as it came, leaving him gasping. Amara found him crouched on the floor, drone pieces scattered like broken fragments of his mind. "What happened?" she demanded. He pressed a hand to his temple. "I saw something. A flash, a meeting, a warning, about what I don't know, but it felt dangerous." Her chest tightened. She wanted to dismiss it as a delusion, but something in his haunted eyes told her otherwise. The next day, Amara faced her board. Novaray's acquisition of AeonSense AI had been finalized, yet she could barely savor the victory. The boardroom's polished marble and floor-to-ceiling windows offered no comfort. "Congratulations, Ms. Johnson," her assistant said. "This is the deal your late mentor would have celebrated." "Good," she replied absently. But her thoughts lingered elsewhere on Ethan, on the way his presence in her home had begun to shift its very atmosphere. For the first time in years, her house echoed with laughter that wasn't streamed from a television. And that frightened her more than any competitor ever could. That evening, Ethan lingered in the hallway, watching Amara remove her earrings before the mirror. "You changed your perfume," he said softly. She stilled. "You remember that?" "No," he admitted. "But I remember how I felt when I smelled it. Like missing something I didn't know I'd lost." Her throat tightened. The silence between them was charged, fragile, alive. Then his voice dropped lower. Lila told me today she wants a sibling. Amara spun, startled. She what? He chuckled, though his eyes glistened. She said it would make the family feel more real. Her defenses rose like shields. This isn't a game, Ethan. I never said it was. Then stop acting like this is easy. His smile faded. Nothing about this is easy. Least of all, loving someone who's forgotten you. The word love thundered in the quiet, leaving Amara breathless. Days later, Dr. Sandel, the neurologist, delivered his verdict after reviewing Ethan's scans. Signs of prior cranial trauma are clear. The memory loss is genuine. Sometimes, with the right triggers, fragments return. Sometimes they never do. Amara pressed her lips together. He deserves to know who he was. The doctor's voice was gentle. Perhaps. But who he is now might matter even more. The fragile peace was shattered with a single headline. On her office tablet, Amara froze at the sight of a face she wished had remained a rumor. Damian Walker returns to public eye. Walker Dynamics expands to the West Coast. Her blood ran cold. Damian, Ethan's elder brother. Ruthless, polished, dangerous. The man whose shadow had loomed even in whispers. If Ethan's memories were fragments of glass, Damian was the hand pressing them deeper into the wound. That night, Amara found Ethan on the balcony again, the city stretching like a galaxy beneath them. Your brother, she said carefully. He's making moves in San Francisco. His jaw tightened. I have a brother. She blinked. He honestly didn't remember. Yes, she whispered. And if he knows you're alive, he won't stay silent. Ethan turned his eyes stormy, with both fear and resolve. Then we don't wait for him to strike. Amara's heart thudded. What are you saying? He stepped closer. His presence overwhelming yet steady. We control the narrative before he does. She searched his face, torn between disbelief and the dangerous allure of trust. Control the narrative, she echoed. Yes. His hand hovered near hers, not touching, but close enough to burn. Tell the world I'm alive. Tell them who I am now, not what Damian decides. The rain began to fall again, tapping softly against the glass. Amara stared at him, caught between past wounds and a future she hadn't dared imagine. You're asking me to gamble everything, she whispered. He held her gaze. No, I'm asking you to choose us. Her breath hitched. For a heartbeat, she almost did. Almost. Then her phone buzzed, shattering the moment. A message. Anonymous. A photo attachment. She opened it and felt her blood freeze. The photo showed Ethan, not the man he was now, but a younger version, confident, commanding, seated at the head of a boardroom table. Beside him, Damian leaned close, whispering something that looked like poison. The caption beneath chilled her more than the image. He wasn't lost. He was erased. The ballroom lights of the Conrad Hotel in New York shimmered like constellations, each crystal chandelier a galaxy suspended above the press. Reporters clustered in restless knots, lenses flashing, murmurs buzzing through the air like static before a storm. Amara stood just beyond the stage, her hands clasped so tightly she could feel the crescent marks of her nails in her palms. Beside her, Ethan adjusted the lapels of his navy suit, borrowed from her connections, but worn as though he had been born in it. The irony was not lost on her. A man who had spent years wandering nameless through shelters and side streets now stood at the brink of reclaiming his place in the world. Are you ready? She whispered. His blue-gray eyes met hers, steady, though his breath trembled. I'm not, but I'll do it anyway. And that, she realized, was courage stepping forward, not when certainty reigned, but when doubt still clawed at the edges. When Ethan took the podium, Silence swept through the room. "My name," he began, "is Ethan Walker," and his voice is raw. "5 years ago, I was presumed dead, but I lived." The words rippled across the audience. Pens scratched. Cameras clicked. I survived an accident that stripped me of my memory, my identity, everything I once thought defined me. For years, I wandered without answers, without titles, without wealth. What I did not know was that in that time, a daughter was waiting to meet me. A soft murmur surged. Amara, watching from the wings, held her breath. He hadn't rehearsed those words. They were his truth, unpolished yet searing. "I am not here to reclaim an empire," Ethan continued. "I am here to claim the only role that matters, father, and perhaps partner. I am here to build again, not from legacy, but love." The ballroom was still. Then, in a rare break from journalistic detachment, applause rippled through the crowd. Amara exhaled. Her knees felt weak, but her heart burned with something she hadn't felt in years, dangerous hope. Outside, the Manhattan air bit cold. Reporters clamored, but Amara ushered Ethan quickly into the waiting car. Lila, tucked between them, beamed. "You sounded like a superhero," she declared. Ethan laughed softly. "I'd settle for being your dad." She shook her head with solemn wisdom only children could wield. "All superheroes are dads first." Amara's throat tightened. She looked out the tinted window, hiding the tears that threatened. But victory was never unchallenged. A sharp ache gripped her chest as Amara scrolled through headlines that night. "Walker Dynasty Shaken. Is Ethan Walker alive?" "Corporate Rivals. Brace for War as Forgotten Heir Returns." And worst, Damian Walker breaks silence. "If my brother lives, he must prove he deserves his name." Amara set the tablet down, her hand trembling. She had known Damian would move, but she hadn't expected him to be so swift, so public. Ethan stepped from the balcony, where he had been staring at the Manhattan skyline. "He's already striking, isn't he?" "Yes," she said flatly. He came closer, his presence unsettling in its warmth. "Then, we don't hide." "You make it sound simple," she snapped. His voice softened. "It's not. But if we let him define us, he wins before the fight begins." Her eyes lifted to his, and though fear burned in her veins, she could not ignore the ember of strength flickering in his gaze. The next morning, Leela padded into the kitchen clutching her tablet. "Mommy, look." She had recorded a short video on the screen, her little voice narrating over sketches of robots and family stick figures. "This is my dad. He forgot everything, but he remembered me. That's what love does. It remembers even when your brain doesn't." Amara blinked, stunned. The video was raw, unpolished, childlike, and yet more powerful than any press conference. Lila tilted her head. "Can we show people? So they know he's real?" Amara's instinct screamed to shield her daughter. But another truth tugged. Sometimes innocence cut through lies, sharper than any strategy. By nightfall, the video had spread across social media. Parents shared it. Strangers wept at it. The hashtag #LoveRemembers trended for 2 days straight. And for the first time, Amara saw that her daughter's voice might be their most excellent defense. Damian watched from his San Francisco office, glass of scotch in hand. The footage of his brother alive and applauded played on a wall-sized screen. And then Lila's video. That small, unshakable voice is undoing years of carefully constructed narratives. He slammed the glass down, amber liquid splintering across the desk. "Prepare the papers," he told his legal team. "What grounds, sir?" He smiled thinly. "Custody. If Ethan wants to play father, let's see if the law agrees. And if we freeze Amara Johnson's assets in the process, all the better." The summons arrived 3 days later. Amara read it at her office desk, her body rigid guardianship inquiry. Filed by Damien Walker, citing Ethan's instability and her conflict of interest. Her assistant hovered nervously. Should I schedule a response? Amara's voice was ice. Yes. And prepare for war. That evening, she found Ethan in Lila's room, helping her assemble pastel-colored blocks into an unstable tower. Daddy, it keeps falling. Lila giggled. He smiled softly. Then we build again. Amara lingered in the doorway, her heart clenching at the metaphor. When Lila finally drifted to sleep, she pulled Ethan aside. She handed him the papers. His face darkened as he read. Custody not of Lila, Amara said bitterly. Of control. Over Novare. Over you. Over us. He gripped the papers so tightly his knuckles whitened. I'll testify. I'll fight. She met his eyes fierce. Then we fight together. The courtroom in San Francisco smelled faintly of old wood and ink. Reporters filled the gallery hungry for spectacle. Ethan sat beside Amara, his hand brushing hers beneath the table. It was a silent vow, fragile but unbreakable. The judge, a woman with kind eyes and a razor-sharp tone, reviewed the files. Mr. Walker, she said, you claim memory loss. Why return now? Ethan rose, voice quiet but unwavering. Because I found my family. I will not let them be destroyed by someone who never wanted to protect them. A murmur spread through the courtroom. Damien, seated smugly with his attorneys, interjected. Your Honor, he remembers only what benefits him. This is manipulation. Amara stood, her voice clear as crystal. If manipulation is his accusation, let the records show. Damien Walker's specialty is precisely fraud, vendettas, and corporate deceit. This isn't about Henry's memory. It's about Damien's control. The judge raised a hand. Enough. I will issue a restraining order. Mr. Damien Walker is prohibited from contacting Ms. Johnson or her daughter until further notice. Damien's face twisted. He rose abruptly. You can't shut me out. Ethan turned, his eyes blazing. Watch her. She can. The courtroom erupted in whispers. That night, in the quiet of their Seattle home, Amara set the restraining order on the counter. It was a victory, but a temporary one. Ethan approached, his face tired yet determined. You kept us safe today, he said softly. She shook her head for now. Damien doesn't lose gracefully. He placed a hand over hers. Then neither do we. For a moment, silence wrapped them, tender and dangerous. Then his voice dropped. Amara, I don't remember our past, but when I look at you I feel it, not memory, something deeper, like home. Her breath faltered. The words, so simple, pierced through years of walls. She wanted to run. She wanted to stay. Instead, she whispered, Don't make promises you can't keep. He smiled sadly. Then I'll make only one. I'll stay. And for the first time, she let herself believe him. But Damien Walker lit another cigar in a skyscraper high above San Francisco and stared at different documents. Leaked records, family estates, bloodlines traced like spider webs. At the center, Lila Johnson's name. He exhaled smoke, his smile cruel. They think they've won, he murmured. Let's see what happens when the world questions whether that child was theirs. The morning began with rain, not the gentle mist of Seattle, but a relentless downpour that hammered the glass walls of Amara's penthouse like fists demanding entry. Thunder rumbled over Elliott Bay, a warning from the sky itself. Amara stood barefoot in her kitchen silk robe, tied loosely, staring at the tablet her assistant had delivered only minutes ago. Headlines screamed across the screen. Leaked documents. raise questions about Walker Air. Is Lila Johnson truly a Walker or a legacy deception? Bloodline. Dossier reveals shocking anomalies. Her throat tightened. She scrolled each word, slicing deeper. The dossier alleged that Lila was not Ethan's biological child, nor even Amara's in a legal sense, but tied to an old European trust, an implication as cruel as it was absurd. The papers had been doctored, but carried the veneer of legitimacy that the public devoured. Damien's fingerprints were all over it. Mommy Lila's small voice drifted from the hallway. She rubbed her eyes, curls tousled from sleep. Why are you crying? Amara swallowed hard, forcing composure. She knelt, pulling her daughter close. Just rain, baby. The sky's crying, not me. But her arms tightened around the girl, as though the storm outside could reach in and snatch her away. Ethan returned from an early run, damp hair plastered to his forehead. He froze at the sight of Amara's pale face. What happened? Wordlessly, she handed him the tablet. He read. His jaw clenched. Veins pulsed at his temple. They're trying to erase her, he whispered. Yes. Amara's voice broke. And I won't let them. His hands trembled not from exhaustion but fury. Then we fight louder than their lies. Amara shook her head. Louder isn't enough. We need to be true. That evening, they gathered in the living room. The city glowed through the windows, rain-slick and restless. Amara paced words tumbling like shards. They won't stop until they dismantle everything. Nova Ray, the initiative us. Damien knows if he taints Lila's name, he wounds me where I cannot recover. Ethan leaned against the fireplace, watching her with storm-tossed eyes. Then we take his weapon and turn it into ours. She stilled. How? By showing the world, not what blood says, but what love proves. Amara shook her head, torn. You make it sound easy. It's not, he said softly. But the truth never is. Later that night, as thunder rolled over the sound, Amara found Lila curled on the rug with her sketchbook. Crayons littered the floor like fallen soldiers. What are you drawing? Amara asked gently. Lila looked up, her eyes solemn a storm. But instead of rain, it makes light. Amara's breath caught. On the page, 3 stick figures herself. Ethan and Lila stood hand in hand beneath a dark cloud. From the cloud, golden rays rained down instead of water. Lila had written beneath it in shaky but determined letters, "No one can erase us." We draw again. Amara pressed a trembling hand to her lips. In that moment, she knew this was their answer. Not legal jargon. Not corporate spin. A child's unfiltered truth. The next day, Amara convened with her communications director. The woman frowned at the proposal. You want to release this drawing? Yes, Amara said firmly. But not just the drawing. A statement. Honest. Intimate. On our terms. The director hesitated. It's risky. Children. They are not bargaining chips. Amara cut in. That's the point. Damien turned her into a weapon. We're turning her back into a child. Hours later, under the sterile glow of a studio light, Amara sat against a plain white backdrop. Lila's artwork was taped gently to the wall behind her. Her hands folded, her voice steady, she began. When I found out I was pregnant, I was 23. I had just walked away from a deal that would have made me rich and miserable. I chose love. And when I thought that love had died, I chose legacy. She paused, meeting the camera's gaze, as though it were an old enemy. Today, a piece of my history was twisted into weaponry. But I will not apologize for others' secrets. only for what I choose to do with them now. Lila Johnson is mine, by blood, by soul, by every sleepless night, and every morning filled with joy. No legacy predates that. Her voice broke just slightly. Truth is not what we inherit. It's what we choose to protect. Ethan entered, then taking the chair beside her. I lost my memory, he said, his voice low, rough with emotion. But I never lost my instinct. I didn't know she was mine the first time I saw Lila, but something in me knew. And I know this: if you define us by bloodlines, you miss the miracle entirely. The camera cut to Lila's drawing. The storm is drizzling. The words, "We draw again." Within hours, the video spread like wildfire. Parents across the country posted their children's artwork under the hashtag #WeDrawAgain. Some showed rainbows, others families, others dragons, breathing flowers instead of fire. The message was clear: love defined family more than ink on paper. Amara sat in her office, scrolling through the flood of responses. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks. She had built empires, negotiated with titans, stared down the most ruthless men, but never had she felt such overwhelming solidarity. For once, the world listened not to power, but to innocence. But Damian Walker was not a man to be undone by sentiment. He watched the campaign unfold in his San Francisco tower with cold fury. His assistant hovered nervously. They've flipped the narrative, sir. Public opinion is enough. Damian's voice cut like steel. He poured himself another glass of scotch, swirling it with calculated calm. We burn what they love most if they want to play with fire. His assistant paled. Maria. A thin smile curved Damian's lips. No. The child. That night, Amara tucked Lila into bed. The girl yawned, her eyelids heavy. Mommy, she whispered. Yes, sweet pea. If Daddy remembers everything, does that mean you'll fall in love again? Amara froze. The innocence of the question disarmed her more than any courtroom ever had. Some things she said softly, stroking her daughter's hair, take more than memory. They take courage. Lila yawned again. You're both courageous. Amara lingered at the doorway long after her daughter had drifted into dreams. In the hallway, Ethan stood waiting. He reached for Amara's hand, brushing his thumb against her knuckles. We'll keep her safe, he said. Her eyes glistened, even if it costs us everything. He nodded, resolve hardening his jaw. Especially then. 2 nights later, while Seattle slept under sheets of rain, a shadow slipped through the streets toward Queen Anne Hill. A figure in a charcoal coat, masked, silent. Inside the penthouse, Ethan stirred from restless sleep. A sound, a creak too deliberate, pulled him from bed. Amara was already at Lila's door, clutching her daughter to her chest. Stay here, Ethan whispered. Barefoot, he moved into the hallway, muscles coiled, heart pounding. The intruder emerged from the darkness, armed, poised. But Ethan fought like a man who had already died once and refused to leave again. The struggle was brutal, silent, except for the thud of fists, the crash of a vase shattering against marble. When the intruder finally lay unconscious, Ethan bound him with nothing but a curtain tie and the wire of a phone charger. When the police arrived, Amara and Ethan stood together in the doorway, trembling, Lila safe between them. The headlines the next day were merciless. Attempted break-in at Johnson residence. Motive unknown. Security breach raises questions of corporate sabotage. But Amara and Ethan knew the truth. This was not sabotage. It was a warning. They sat silently at the kitchen table, untouched coffee cooling between them. He sent someone. Amara whispered. Yes, Ethan said. His hands were clenched, knuckles raw from the fight. And he'll send more. Her eyes burned. Then we stop waiting. We go on the offensive." Ethan looked at her, his stormy gaze sharpening into something almost dangerous. "Are you saying—" She leaned forward, voice like steel. "If Damien wants war, then we give him one, but not in shadows. In daylight, where the world can see." The rain outside pounded harder like the sky braced for the battle to come. The flight to Oslo cut through the night like a silver blade. Outside the cabin window, the aurora shimmered faintly across the Arctic sky, green ribbons twisting against the black. To Amara Johnson, it looked like handwriting she could not decipher, an ancient script scrawled across the heavens. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, posture regal even in exhaustion. Across the aisle, Ethan dozed lightly, though his brow furrowed as if even sleep carried storms. Beside him, Lila was curled beneath a galaxy-patterned blanket, a sketchbook still clutched in her hand. Amara studied her daughter's small fingers, wrapped around the crayons. Each line the child drew lately seemed prophetic dragons that breathed flowers, storms that rained light crowns, split in two. Innocence. Yes, but also a strange kind of truth-telling. "Your mother once carried that same look," a voice intruded, low and precise. Amara turned. At the far end of the cabin, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes regarded her. Elise Leland, director of the International Legacy Council. One of the few people alive who had truly known Ariel Johnson, Amara's mother. "You've met me before," Elise said calmly, approaching. "However, you were too young to remember." Amara stiffened. "I know who you are, and you know why the council summoned you." Elise's gaze flicked briefly to the sleeping child. "The bloodline question is not new. It has haunted your family for decades." Amara's spine straightened. "And whose fault is that?" "My mother died under circumstances you still call an accident." Elise's expression flickered the faintest ghost of remorse. "Oslo will give you answers, but it will also demand courage." Amara's eyes hardened. "Courage is all I have left." Oslo greeted them with a brittle winter sun, pale and unyielding. The council's headquarters rose like a fortress of glass and marble along the harbor, austere against the steel-gray water. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and polished stone. 10 figures sat in a crescent chamber, their faces a tapestry of power, some sharp with suspicion, others softened by the weight of years. Amara stood alone in the center, her posture commanding. Ethan and Lila had been asked to remain outside. "You are Amara Johnson," one councilman began, his accent crisp. "Daughter of Ariel Leland. You resurrect a name long buried. Do you claim the right to it?" Amara said, "I do not claim what is not mine," her voice clear as crystal. "I claim only what my mother protected, and what my daughter deserves to live free of your shadows." Murmurs rose. Another leaned forward. "Your mother's death was regrettable, but you tread dangerous ground speaking of her choices." Amara's temper, usually contained like fire behind glass, flickered dangerously. "Regrettable." She was silenced. "And now you try to erase her granddaughter the same way." A heavy silence fell. Even the marble seemed to hold its breath. Then Elise Leland spoke. "What do you want, Amara?" Her voice did not waver. "Acknowledgement. And your absence. I do not need your protection. I need you to step aside." The chamber erupted in whispers, half scandal, half awe. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in a gilded waiting room with Lila on his lap. His fingers traced the edges of a child's drawing she had thrust into his hands. A tree with roots spreading wide. A crown cracked in two above it. "Families are like forests," Lila explained softly. "The old trees fall, but the roots stay." Ethan swallowed hard, moved by the strange wisdom of her words. "Who taught you that?" She shrugged. I just heard it in Mommy's voice when she reads. Ethan's chest tightened. Even without memory, something inside him recognized truth when it appeared in crayon and paper. But his peace was fractured when a sudden flash seared his mind. A boardroom. Damien's face twisted with fury, the slam of a contract on polished wood. His own voice shouting, "Legacy is not power. It's purpose." He jolted, nearly dropping the paper. His pulse raced. Daddy Lila's voice was small. He forced a smile. Just remembering. Back in the chamber, Elise rose. Enough. Her gaze swept across the others, silencing the murmurs. We cannot change what was buried, but we can choose what rises. She turned to Amara. You ask for acknowledgement and absence. Very well. We will not contest your child's place, nor yours. But remember, power abhors a vacuum. Where we withdraw, others will step in. Amara inclined her head, victory tempered by unease. Then let them try. As she left the chamber, she carried herself like a queen who had won a battle, but not the war. That night, in their Oslo suite overlooking the frozen harbor, Ethan found Amara standing by the window, her shoulders taut. You faced them alone, he said softly. Her reflection in the glass was sharp, unyielding. It was my mother's fight long before it was mine. He approached, hesitating before placing a tentative hand on her shoulder. She did not pull away. I remembered something today, he murmured. Damien. The boardroom. My own words. Her breath caught. What did you say? That legacy isn't power. It's purpose. Amara turned slowly, her eyes shimmering. Those were my mother's words. The silence between them pulsed. For a moment, it was as though time folded past and present, colliding in a truth neither had expected. Ethan lifted a hand, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. His touch lingered, fragile yet electric. I don't remember us, he whispered. But when I'm near you, I feel like I've already chosen you 1,000 times. Her defenses wavered. Her heart, so long armored, trembled. Don't say it unless you mean it, she whispered. I don't know my past, he admitted. But I know my now, and it's you. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to lean into him, to let the warmth of another body soften the edges of her solitude. The next morning, Amara received a message slipped under her door. No name. Just a single sentence scrawled in ink. Ethan's survival was no accident. Your mother's death was no accident, and Damien is not working alone. Her pulse thundered. She crumpled the paper, but its weight lingered in her palm like a curse. In San Francisco, Damien Walker stood before a vault deep beneath his tower. He entered a code, and the door yawned open with mechanical finality. Inside lay a sleek titanium case. He lifted it, lips curving in a smile devoid of warmth. The bloodline isn't just legacy, he murmured. It's leverage. Behind him, a shadowed figure stepped forward. Are you ready to rewrite everything? Damien asked. The man nodded once, and Damien's smile sharpened. Back in Oslo, Amara sat with Ethan and Lila in the suite's quiet lounge. The fire crackled softly, throwing golden light across their faces. Lila clambered onto her father's lap, sketchbook open. Draw with me, Daddy. Ethan obliged, his large hands clumsy with the crayon. He drew a crooked house. She giggled and added a garden full of flowers. Amara watched them, her heart caught between fear and longing. She had fought courts, councils, and shadows of history. But this fragile piece was what she was most afraid of losing. Mommy, Lila chirped. When we go home, can we plant a real garden? Amara's throat tightened. She glanced at Ethan, who was already watching her with that raw, unguarded tenderness. Yes, Amara whispered. We'll plant one together. But even as she spoke, the paper in her pocket burned with its warning. And somewhere across the sea, Damian Walker was already preparing the storm to uproot everything they had just begun to build. The headlines traveled faster than any storm sweeping continents in a day. Walker bloodline, under siege. Scandal at the core of Horizon Initiative. Anonymous sources. Claim Lila Johnson not legally recognized. Amara shut the tablet with a decisive snap, as though silencing the words could erase their venom. But the damage was already done. Reporters camped outside the Seattle penthouse. Drones hovered illegally near her balcony. Social media churned with doubt and division. And in the middle of it all, Lila remained blissfully unaware, curled on the couch, with her crayons drawing yet another storm that refused to rain water. "We can't stay here," Ethan said, pacing the living room. His shoulders were tense, his jaw clenched. "They'll find ways to twist every breath we take." Amara lifted her gaze, weary, yet unbroken. "Where then?" "There's no corner Damian won't reach." "The Blue Ridge cabin," he said. "Your friend June offered it once. Remote. Safe." Her instinct was to protest. Running felt like surrender. But then she looked at her daughter, small and defenseless, humming as she shaded the rays of light. Safety outweighed pride. "Pack what matters," Amara said. "We leave tonight." The cabin stood nestled among pines that swayed like guardians, their branches whispering secrets to the wind. When they arrived under the cover of dusk, fireflies danced in the clearing, tiny lanterns guiding them home. Amara stepped inside first. The air smelled of cedar and old books, the scent that seeped into bones and soothed them. Wooden beams stretched above a fireplace, waiting patiently for flame. Lila darted from room to room, delight sparking in her voice. "It's like a fairy house." Ethan set their bags down, their eyes scanning the space with relief and caution. "It'll do." For the first time in weeks, Amara felt the tightness in her chest ease, if only slightly. The city's clamor was gone, replaced by the chorus of crickets and the hush of forest air. Here for a breath of time they could exist. That evening, Ethan built a fire while Lila sat cross-legged nearby, narrating an elaborate story about dragons who painted the sky instead of breathing flame. Amara listened, sipping tea, her gaze lingering on Ethan's hands as they coaxed sparks into flame. He looked different here, less like a man on trial with the world, and more like the man she imagined he might have been once. A man who could build warmth out of kindling, laugh at a child's tales, and let silence be a companion rather than a curse. When Lila finally drifted to sleep on the rug, her sketchbook open across her chest, Amara rose to carry her to bed. Ethan followed, watching Amara tuck the blanket around her daughter's small shoulders. "She trusts you completely," Amara whispered, brushing a curl from Lila's forehead. Ethan's voice was husky. "I don't deserve it, but I'll never betray it." Their eyes met in the dim light. Something fragile, something dangerous flickered between them. Later, they sat on the porch, the night air cool against their skin. The forest stretched dark and endless, punctuated by the glow of fireflies. Amara broke the silence. "You're quieter here." "So are you," Ethan replied softly. She breathed, tilting her head back to watch the stars. "I built my life on noise. Deals, deadlines, appearances. Quiet scares me. And me," he admitted. Then, after a pause, "But with you it doesn't." The words sank into her like warm rain. She turned, studying him. His face, half lit by firelight, carried both strength and vulnerability. The scar beneath his brow, the storm in his eyes, the uncertainty in his voice, formed a man she should fear trusting, yet couldn't stop leaning toward. "Ethan," she whispered. He reached out tentatively, his fingers brushing hers, and he did not claim. He just asked. Her heart pounded. For once, she let her defenses fall. She intertwined her fingers with his. And in that simple act, the silence between them bloomed into something vast, making the whole forest seem to lean in and listen. The days unfolded with an unfamiliar rhythm. Morning walks along winding trails. Simple meals shared without haste, evenings by the fire, where Lila insisted on fairy tales improvised by both her parents. Ethan grew more at ease, though shadows of memory still stalked him. Sometimes he froze mid-sentence, a flash cutting through contract signatures, Damien's voice. Other times he laughed freely, as though the past had never existed. For Amara, the cabin became a paradox. Each moment of peace deepened her longing and fear, because peace was fragile, because peace never lasted. One afternoon, while Lila painted outside, Ethan found Amara in the kitchen slicing lemons. He leaned against the counter watching her. "You've been avoiding me," he said gently. She stilled knife poised above the cutting board. "I've been busy. Busy being afraid?" Her eyes flashed through, not with anger, with truth she could not deny. "I don't know how to let someone in without losing myself." He stepped closer, his voice low, steady. "Then, don't lose yourself. Let me find you instead." The knife clattered softly onto the board. Her breath caught. His hand rose, cupping her cheek. She didn't pull away this time. The kiss that followed was not rushed. It was slow, searching, reverent, like they were both learning a forgotten language. His lips tasted of firelight and promised hers of fear and surrender. When they broke apart, foreheads touching, she whispered, "This doesn't make the world less dangerous." "No," he murmured, "but it makes it worth facing." That night, after Lila had drifted to sleep, Amara and Ethan sat silently by the fire. The storm outside the cabin had passed, leaving only the hush of dripping leaves. Amara traced the rim of her wineglass, her voice hushed. "If Damien destroys everything tomorrow, if the world turns against us, what then?" Ethan's eyes burned into hers. "Then we build again, like Lila's towers. And this time we build stronger." She blinked back tears. "You make it sound possible." He reached for her hand, entwining their fingers. "Because with you it is." For the first time in years, Amara believed not in survival, but in something rarer. Continuance. But peace is always fragile. A local sheriff arrived at the cabin with a sealed envelope 3 days later. For Ms. Johnson, he said, his voice apologetic. "Delivered from San Francisco." Amara took it with dread curling in her stomach. She broke the seal. Inside was a single photo. Ethan, in a boardroom. Damien at his side. A document between them. And scrawled across the bottom in ink, "You've only seen the beginning." Her hands trembled. She looked at Ethan, whose face had gone pale, eyes wide with something between recognition and terror. Another flash struck him, voices shouting, Damien's hand on his shoulder, the slam of a contract, and then darkness. Amara's voice broke. "What did you sign, Ethan? What did he make you sign?" He shook his head, breath ragged. "I don't know, but I think it's what he's using to destroy us now." Outside, thunder rolled once more across the Blue Ridge Mountains, as though the sky itself confirmed the truth. Their haven would not remain safe for long. Dawn came thin and blue to the ridge, a light ribbon caught in the pine's needles. The cabin felt smaller after the envelope, every window a watching eye, every floorboard a secret that might creak at the wrong time. Amara woke before the birds and didn't bother with coffee. She stood at the kitchen island with the photograph laid flat beneath her palm, as if anchoring it could change the past it hinted at. Ethan didn't speak when he joined her. He only studied the image himself, in a glass-bright boardroom, Damien leaning in, a paper between them, like a blade, and then quietly he turned the photo over, as though the darkness of the table might grant them amnesty. "What did he make you sign?" Amara asked. He shook his head, eyes distant. It's there, just out of reach. Like a name you knew as a child, and lost in a move. Then we go looking, she said. For my memory. His smile was small and worn. Or for the paper he hid behind it. For both, she answered, and there was a softness in her voice that made it sound like a vow. She left him in the quiet and returned with a flat black drive from the false base of her suitcase. No label, just a scratch on the corner where her thumbnail had worried it during nights that wouldn't end. I copied something years ago, she said, when Nova Ray first pitched to Walker Dynamics before I learned better than to bring my heart into rooms with mirrored walls. Internal communications from the 6 months before your accident. I never opened it. I told myself I was done with ghosts. Then I met you at a bus stop without knowing why breathing hurt. Ethan looked at the drive as if it were a relic recovered from a wreck at sea. You kept it. I kept it because something in me was already running, she said, and her eyes didn't waver. And I've always known that the past is the only robber you cannot handcuff. They cleared the table. Lila, still asleep, curled beneath a quilt that smelled faintly of cedar and sun. Amara slid the drive into her laptop. The screen bloomed. Folders opened like sealed rooms. Search terms, Ethan asked. She typed, continuity, then succession, then because fear prefers synonyms. Covenant. Files appeared, memos that read like sermons delivered by lawyers. Calendar invites with names that sounded like chess openings. A chain marked Palimpsest Draft 3. Open it, Ethan said. She did. A PDF unfurled, clean fonts, masking ugly intent. Clause 17C. In the event of incapacitation, presumed death, or attested cognitive impairment of Executive E. Walker. Fiduciary authority over pending innovations. Philanthropic instruments and equity tranches shall revert in continuity to Acting Chair D. Walker, until Executive can establish. The rest blurred. Ethan pressed his fingertips into his eyes and saw the boardroom through the red haze behind his lids, a room cold as surgery. A pen with a serpent worked into the clip, the smell of antiseptic under expensive cologne. He exhaled. Palimpsest. A text written over another so the first goes unseen unless you know how to light it. They buried you in the margins, Amara said. And the signature, he asked, throat dry. She scrolled. The last page was bare white under the digital weight of an empty line. She said no signature in the file, with a sharp relief that hurt only a placeholder. Then, where's the signed version, Ethan asked. Asleep somewhere. Damien thinks we can't wake it. A chime interrupted them. An untraceable email slid into an account Amara used only for family. It contained no greeting, no threat coordinates, a time and a line that felt like a hand on the back of the neck. Harbor Master keeps the ledgers cold. If you want your name back, claim it. Amara pulled up a map. The pin glowed in the industrial veins of Newark, a cold storage facility near the port rows of low buildings, like teeth night shift sodium lights, brassing the dark. Harbor Master Ethan repeated, tasting the word. It wasn't a title, but a role, someone who moved things between worlds without ever appearing in either. Amara said that we spring it on purpose, if it's a trap. He looked up. With Lila here? No, she answered, already thinking 3 moves ahead. With Lila safe. By mid-morning, June arrived in her dented Subaru, arms loaded with groceries. She pretended it was necessary to hug them without making a ceremony. She looked at their faces and knew which stories to save for later. I'll keep her, June said. We'll paint the porch with sunflowers and bake something that gets flour in her hair. She won't watch the news. Lila barreled into June like light. When Amara knelt to kiss her daughter's forehead, Lila held her face in small hands and studied her with a seriousness that made Amara want to cry. Mommy, she said, if the world gets stormy, take a jar. Please, bring me a little piece of the rain. Amara laughed because not laughing would be dangerous. I'll bring you a jar of stars. Deal. Lila grinned, then turned to Ethan. Daddy, take the blue crayon. It's for finding your way back. He tucked it into his pocket like a talisman. I'll bring it home dull. Good, she said solemnly. That means you used it. They left when the sun was still polite, a gray ribbon of highway unspooling toward the coast. Amara scrolled through more files in the passenger seat, lips pressed into a line. Ethan drove with both hands tight on the wheel, the blue crayon a small weight against his thigh. Tell me something true, he said after an hour of silence. She looked up. About what? About you. That I wouldn't know, unless I had known you before. She watched the road cut a clean seam through the forest. I hate balloons, she said. They look like they're always leaving, and when they pop, it's never the moment you expect. He smiled. And something else. I wanted to be an architect, she said before I learned that the buildings that matter most aren't made of steel. He nodded long and slow, like his heart was a boat turning to face a current. I built too many of the wrong ones, he said. If I get another life, and I seem to have gotten one, I want to develop the kind that lets light through. They crossed bridges that lifted them over water the color of a bruise. New York rose in the distance, a city always on the brink of becoming itself again. They didn't stop. The turnpike carried them south past towers and silos and billboards that promised salvation in 12-point font. In a motel near Jersey City, with carpet that smelled faintly of lemon, and something you couldn't name, Amara set up her laptop and a shortwave receiver June had insisted on thrusting into her hands. You'd be amazed what men who love power forget about old frequencies, June had said, eyes bright. Ethan wrote a letter to Lila about the motel stationery, which was a little ridiculous in its printed flourish. He made himself write in ink because memory deserved to weigh something. When finished, he folded it twice and taped it to the inside of his wallet. Insurance, Amara asked. Prayer, he answered. At midnight, an email arrived unsigned, and inevitable a single sentence that tightened every muscle in his back. If you want the signed palimpsest, come alone. We won't, Amara said. I've never met a man who could count to 2 when he wanted you alone. There will be eyes and ears, and ours will be better. Then we go in like the kind of fools who survive, he said. Careful, she murmured, brushing her knuckles along his jaw, an absent tenderness that startled them both. That's my species. He laughed softly, then sobered. If I don't remember the path, follow your own. I will, she said, but you might hate where it leads. I won't, he answered, and for once he sounded like a man who believed himself. They slept a little badly. At 4, the world between night and morning made everything look like it had decided at last to become its most authentic self. They drove east into a fog that turned parking lot lights into floating orbs. The port cranes, like prehistoric skeletons, paused in a slow dance. The cold storage facility wasn't pretending to be anything but what it was, a concrete block with a blinking red eye above the door and a keypad that wore the fingerprints of people who lived by numbers. The air inside tasted like metal and old snow. Fluorescence hummed indifferent. Somewhere, a compressor exhaled in a steady mechanical patience. Walker, a voice called from beyond a row of steel doors, and Ethan knew before he saw him. Damien's silhouette had the posture of a threat generous enough to smile. He stepped into the light, as if it had been poured for him, tailored charcoal and overcoat the color of polished midnight, a tie knotted with surgical precision. He looked like the kind of man who would never be caught running because he had learned how to make the world come to him. Damien said, I was beginning to think you'd lost your punctuality and memory. Amara moved a half-step closer to Ethan, not behind, not in front, but beside. We came for a copy of Palimpsest, With a signature, she said, "If you wanted an audience, you should have bought a theater." He gave her an appreciative glance, making Ethan want to break his hands. "Ms. Johnson." Damien purred. "You wear war well, and you still mistake a mirror for a window," she replied. He clucked his tongue like her wit were a dessert he'd been served too early. Bold. "Let's hope your daughter inherits your timing." Ethan's voice was very calm when he said, "Say her name, and I will teach you the difference between power and luck." Damien's smile sharpened. "Names are currency. You of all people should know that." He gestured, and a man emerged from the shadows. A shape in a charcoal coat, the kind that didn't wrinkle when you made bad decisions. He carried a slim, foam-lined case. Damien said that the harbor master keeps the ledgers cold, and the words from the email tilted the floor under Amara's feet. "And I am nothing if not a diligent client." He nodded to the man who set the case on a stainless steel table and opened it with a hush of yielding hinges. Inside a tablet, matte black, the kind a lawyer prefers when he wants to pretend he cares about forests. And beside it, a folder whose edges already felt like guilt. Damien touched the tablet, and the screen woke to a document that wore its fonts like a tuxedo. Clause numbers marched down the margins like a column of obedient men. "Continuity," Damien said lightly. "Succession. Covenant. All your favorite words." He turned the tablet toward them. And there it was. The signature line no longer naked. Ethan's name was clean and complete, and there was the flourish of a hand that believed itself. Ethan's breath left him like a blow. He reached for the tablet and then stopped, as though afraid touch might confirm something irreversible. "I don't remember this," he said. "Memory is such a parochial measure of truth," Damien replied. "Ask any court." Amara stepped closer. The date, she said. A week before his accident. How convenient. "Fortuitous," Damien corrected. "A word men with imaginations find useful." Ethan lifted his eyes. "What did you do?" he asked. And if there was fear in his voice, it had learned to disguise itself as fury. "I verified my faith," Damien said, and then, like a conjurer producing a final dove, he slid the folder forward. It was heavier than paper should be. Amara opened the chain of custody forms. Laboratory seals are impressed into colored stickers, a receipt that referred not to people but to samples. Her stomach turned. "What is this insurance?" Damien said. "Prayer, as your companion so sweetly put it. In the unfortunate event that the courts require persuasion regarding paternity, legacy, inheritance, such dull nouns, I have ensured we can oblige them with science." Ethan moved. The security man's stance altered minutely. The cold in the room grew teeth. Damien sighed. "Temper, brother. You're not the only one who can love something beyond strategy. In my case, it is victory." Amara felt the old rage, clean, bright, clarifying, rise in her like a tide. "You stole from a child," she said, and the words made the air crack. "Borrowed," Damien said, "from an inattentive clinic with porous security. You'd be astonished at the anxious surrender without reading the forms." He flicked his wrist, and the harbor master produced a second case, smaller silver, its hinges finer than jewelry. When he opened it, a vial lay cradled in foam, clear, perfect, a sliver of sun when Damien lifted it to the light. "Don't," Ethan said, but the word wasn't a plea. It was a sentence. His eyes had gone the color of winter steel. Damien tilted the vial and watched it catch the fluorescent glare like a pretty sin. "Your little miracle," he said conversationally, as if reciting a wine note. "Coded and decodable. A story we can rewrite in 1,000 labs. That is the age we live in, dear brother. Not of kings, but of keys." The room shrinks to the size of the vial. Every hum in the vents, every shiver of the compressor, every breath Amara took, counted itself too loudly. She felt the world stack its moments like chips on a table and wait for the next card. "Give it to me," Ethan said. Damien smiled. "Of course not." Amara lifted her chin. "Then show the world who you are. On camera. In this light. With that in your hand." He chuckled, but the sound lacked conviction. "Ever the strategist. Ever the mother," she said. A new sound entered the room, then foreign to metal and ice, the soft click of a door settling into its frame. Damien's eyes flicked past them, a calculation miscounted. Ethan didn't turn. Amara didn't need to. She knew what a trap felt like when it began to change ownership. "Careful," she said softly, watching the pulse jump in Damien's throat. "You're not the only one who knows how to write over a text and leave the first story visible if you hold it to the right light." The vial trembled a fraction between Damien's fingers. For the first time, his smile slipped. And in that sliver of a moment, cold room hot blood, the world balanced on a glass throat, Ethan stepped forward, not with his fists, not with a shout, but with the steady reach of a man who had decided what kind of father he would be, even if the law chose a different word. Damien's hand tipped. The vial flashed. The harbor master moved and the lights went out. The blackout was absolute. One heartbeat. The cold storage chamber was a grid of humming fluorescence. The next, it was an abyss where sound sharpened into weaponry. Amara's first instinct was Lila, even though her daughter was 100 miles away in June's safe embrace. Amara's arms folded around the empty air, as if to shield her. Ethan's first instinct was, Amara. He reached for her wrist in the dark, finding her pulse racing against his fingers. "Stay close," he whispered. His voice was steady, but his breath betrayed the truth. Fear was there, crouching like a beast in the corner. Somewhere in the black, Damien's laugh cut through, low, patient, the kind of laugh that didn't need light to find its audience. "You never did understand the elegance of leverage, brother," he said. "Even darkness can be an asset if you own the fuse box." A shuffle boots against concrete. The harbor master moved, the faint jingle of keys betraying his position. Then a metallic scrape, the silver case lifted from the table. Amara's hand tightened on Ethan's arm. "The vial," she breathed. He didn't answer. He was listening. The listening a man learns when silence means survival. A sudden clang rang. A steel door slammed shut, locking the room into a box. The cold thickened breath visible even in the dark. Then a voice, Damien's nearer now. "Imagine it, Ethan. Court swayed not by your trembling testimony, but by science itself. Legacy quantified your little miracle reduced to numbers, and all it cost me was your absence." Ethan's anger rose like heat against the ice of the room. "You erased me." Damien didn't hesitate. "I preserved myself." Amara's voice cut sharply through the dark. "And you stole from a child. No contract can bury that." A pause. Then Damien exhaled close enough that Amara could smell his cologne. Something sharp and metallic, like victory bottled. "Oh, Amara, you mistake outrage for strategy. You always did play with fire, but you've forgotten fire burns backward too." Ethan moved, then fast, decisive. He lunged toward the sound fingers striking fabric, a shoulder, the heat of Damien's body. They crashed against the table, the tablet clattering to the ground. A light flared suddenly, white, searing from a phone screen. Not much, but enough to sketch outlines in the dark. Damien's face was carved into sharpness. Ethan's jaw was locked with fury, and Amara's eyes were blazing, and the harbor master slipping toward the door with the silver case. Amara reacted first. She grabbed the nearest thing, an abandoned cable length, and hurled it like a whip. It struck the man's wrist, the case tumbling, skidding across the floor. The phone light caught the vial for an instant as it rolled, glass flashing like lightning in miniature. Ethan's hand shot out, seeing it just before it shattered. He held it aloft, breath heaving. Damien's voice dropped to a hiss. Careful, brother. That's not just blood. That's destiny. Ethan's reply was a growl. No, it's my daughter. And she's not yours to rewrite. Hours later, dawn cracked pale over Newark Harbor. Amara, Ethan, and the harbor master's abandoned sedan sat in the shadow of cranes that lifted containers like children's blocks. Amara's hands were steady on the wheel, though her mind was a tempest. In her lap, the vial rested inside a makeshift nest of cloth. You realize, she said, eyes fixed on the road. He won't stop. Not with this setback. Damien doesn't care if he burns his empire, so long as he takes us with it. Ethan stared out the window, jaw tight. Then, we make sure he has nothing left to burn. She glanced at him. That's revenge speaking. He turned eyes raw. That's survival speaking. Their gazes held for a long, taut moment before Amara returned to the road. Survival is never enough. Not for me. Not for her. If we don't stand for something more, Damien wins before the first gavel falls. Silence. Only the hum of tires and the gulls circling the port. Then Ethan's voice softer. Then, please tell me what we stand for, and I'll stand there with you. Amara's throat tightened. She didn't answer, not yet. Some truths required daylight to sound like more than prayer. June's cabin in Blue Ridge had been transformed into a fortress of innocence. Lila sat at the kitchen table, hands stained with watercolor paint, a dragon blooming across the page. June hovered at the stove, humming softly to jazz that curled like smoke. When the door opened, Lila bolted. Mommy. She wrapped her arms around Amara's waist, then turned to Ethan. Daddy, you came back, and you used the crayon right. Ethan knelt, producing the blue crayon from his pocket, now worn to a nub. See? Dull as promised. She grinned triumphant. Amara watched them, her heart splitting open in ways she hadn't permitted in years. But even as joy flooded her, fear shadowed it. Because innocence like this was fragile. And Damien was hunting fragility. That night, with Lila tucked safely into sleep, Amara and Ethan stood on the porch. The mountains loomed black against a star-pierced sky. You saved it, she whispered, glancing at the vial cradled in its cloth. I didn't save glass, he said. I saved her. She looked at him, then really looked. The man who had wandered, lost, who now stood grounded only by the fragile anchor of love. She said softly that you carry guilt for things you don't even remember. But guilt is Damien's weapon, not yours. He stepped closer, his voice rough. Then what's yours? Her breath trembled. Courage. And before fear could intervene, she closed the space between them. Their kiss was deeper than before. No hesitation this time. No borrowed fragments of memory. It was now. It was raw. Two souls were stitching themselves together to defy everything that sought to tear them apart. When they finally parted, foreheads touching, Ethan whispered, If this is all I ever remember, it will be enough. Her eyes shone. Then remember it forever. The peace of that night did not last. By morning, news broke like glass, shattering across the world. Walker dynasty in crisis. Damien accuses brother of fraudulent resurrection. Exclusive anonymous sources. Question DNA. Evidence of Lila Johnson. A video played across networks. Damien standing at a podium in San Francisco, his voice polished as stone. My brother's return, while miraculous, is tainted by deception. If he genuinely believes in legacy, let him prove it, not in shadows but in the courts, in the light. Reporters erupted in questions. Damien raised a hand, the picture of composure. And let us not forget the child. A beautiful child, but a legacy cannot be built on mystery. The truth must be faced. Amara shut the television off before Lila could wander in. Her hands shook, but her voice when she spoke was steel. He's dragging her into the fire. Ethan's jaw hardened. Then we walk in first, and we make sure the flames don't touch her. Amara turned to him, fire in her eyes. You'd risk everything for her, for you, for us. She drew a breath, chest rising like a tide. Then we fight. Not as fugitives, not as survivors, as family. Later, when the house was quiet, Ethan sat alone with Lila's newest drawing, a family beneath a storm rain turned to light. He traced the lines with reverence. Families are like forests, she had said once. And maybe she was right. Old trees fell. New ones rose. Roots tangled, but endured. And he thought Damien had already lost, if this was what legacy meant. But far away in a San Francisco tower, Damien Walker poured scotch into a crystal and studied the footage of Ethan holding the vial. His smile was thin, cruel. Let them think they've won a reprieve, he murmured. Because when I play my next card, they'll learn storms don't always rain light. He slid a new folder across his desk. On its tab, a single word, custody. And beneath it, a name scrawled in bold ink, Lila Johnson Walker. The courthouse in San Francisco rose like a cathedral of judgment, its marble steps slick with morning fog. Outside, reporters lined the barricades, microphones bristling like bayonets. Their voices collided in a storm of questions, each aimed like a stone at Amara and Ethan as they ascended the stairs. Ms. Johnson, do you deny the allegations, Mr. Walker? Can you parent if you can't remember your past? Is the child even yours? The last question sliced deepest. Ethan's jaw flexed, but Amara pressed her hand against his arm. Don't, she whispered. The only answer that matters is inside. Inside, the air smelled of wood polish and nerves. The gallery was full of journalists, rivals, and opportunists who feasted on scandal. At the front, Judge Valencia, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, every inch of her robe, radiating authority, adjusted her glasses and called the session to order. On one side of the aisle sat Damien, immaculate as always, his legal team, an army in dark suits. On the other side sat Amara and Ethan, not outnumbered, but outmaneuvered, at least on paper. The bailiff's voice carried like a bell. In the case of Walker versus Johnson, there was a petition for guardianship and custody. Amara straightened. Every cell in her body hummed with resolve. This was not just law. This was survival. Damien's attorney rose first. His voice was smooth, his cadence rehearsed. Your Honor, we present today, not as a vendetta, but as a concern. My client Damien Walker seeks clarity in legacy inheritance, and most importantly, the welfare of a child. Ethan Walker, presumed dead, resurfaces after 5 years with no memory of his identity, yet claims paternity. Amara Johnson, though accomplished, has a vested interest in shielding him to protect her company's merger. We must ask, where is the stability of the child? Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Damien sat perfectly still, the picture of injured nobility. Amara felt Ethan tense beside her. She slid her hand over his, grounding him. We fight with truth, she whispered. Their attorney, a lean woman named Charlotte with a voice like tempered steel, rose. Your Honor, the opposition cloaks malice in the language of concern. This is not about guardianship. This is about power. Damien Walker's interest in the child is not familial, but strategic. He seeks to discredit Ethan Walker to consolidate control of Walker Dynamics and sabotage Ms. Johnson's company. We will prove this. Judge Valencia's gaze sharpened. Proceed carefully, counselor. This court protects children, not corporations. Exactly, Your Honor, Charlotte replied. The child's safety is best preserved by those who love her, not those who see her as leverage. Testimonies began. Character witnesses, trauma experts. Each side paraded its version of the truth. Damien's camp painted Ethan as unstable, a man who could not be trusted with a child's future when he could barely recall his own. They showed medical scans, hospital notes, and testimony from a neurologist willing to sell conviction for a fee. When Amara took the stand, Damien's attorney pounced. Ms. Johnson, is it fair that your company will gain billions if Ethan Walker is restored as a shareholder of Walker Dynamics? Amara's chin lifted. What my company gains is irrelevant. What my daughter gains is her father. And yet the lawyer pressed your relationship with Mr. Walker is complicated. Her eyes flared, but her voice stayed calm. Complicated does not mean unstable. It means human. And it means we fight for her together. The gallery stirred, whispers buzzing. Then came Ethan's turn. He walked to the stand with shoulders squared, though Amara could feel the tremor in him. He raised his hand, swore the oath, and sat. Damien's attorney leaned forward. Mr. Walker, you admit to memory loss, correct? Yes. And you cannot recall key aspects of your past, including your relationship with Ms. Johnson. That's true. Then how can you claim to be a fit father when you do not remember the man you were? Ethan paused. His gaze drifted to the gallery, then to Amara. She gave him the slightest nod that said, You already know what matters. He leaned forward, voice steady. Because fatherhood isn't in the past, it's in the present. I didn't know she was mine the first time I saw Lila, but something in me did. I learned how to hold her hand across a crosswalk. I learned how to listen when she told me about her robot dog. I learned how to be hers before I knew my own name. That is what makes a father. The courtroom hushed. Even Judge Valencia's pen paused mid-note. Amara's throat tightened. She had heard many speeches in her life, but this was truth dressed in no armor, but love. Damien's eyes, however, narrowed. His lawyer regrouped. Mr. Walker, if you cannot remember your contract signature, how can we trust that you did not sign away your rights before your accident? A document slid onto the evidence table, the palimpsest clause with Ethan's signature bold across the bottom. Gasps rippled. Ethan's hand tightened into a fist. He shook his head. That signature was stolen and/or forced. I don't remember, but I know it wasn't given freely. Convenient, the lawyer sneered. Amara's fury ignited. She rose before her attorney could stop her. You call it convenient. I call it survival. Ethan Walker did not disappear by choice. Damien erased him. The room erupted. The judge's gavel slammed. Order. But the seed had been planted. Recess was called. Amara leaned against the marble wall outside the chamber, her breath shuddering. Ethan stood beside her, jaw taut. You did well, she murmured. I felt like I was drowning, he admitted. You spoke like a man who can swim. Their eyes met, and for a fleeting moment, the courthouse fell away. It was only they two people, battered by tides, still standing. Back inside, the judge called for closing statements. Damien's attorney went first, polished and cold. This case is not about malice, Your Honor. It is about clarity. Until Ethan Walker proves stability, the child should not be subjected to uncertainty. We recommend temporary guardianship to Damien Walker, her uncle, until such stability is proven. The words struck like ice. Amara's stomach twisted. Then Charlotte rose. Your Honor, if we give guardianship to Damien Walker, we hand a child to the very man who orchestrated her father's disappearance. We hand her a legacy of control rather than love. And we tell every child like her that family is decided by power, not presence. She stepped back. Silence followed thick as storm clouds. Judge Valencia's gaze swept the room. I will deliberate. The court is adjourned until tomorrow morning. The gavel fell. That evening, Amara and Ethan walked the Embarcadero city lights glittering across the bay. The weight of uncertainty pressed down, but so did something else, something tender, fragile. Ethan stopped by the railing, the wind tugging at his coat. If she rules against us, Amara silenced him with a hand against his chest. She won't. You don't know that. I don't, she admitted. But I know this Damien builds on fear. We build on love, and that will matter. He looked at her eyes, searching. How can you be so sure? Her voice softened. Because I've seen the way Lila looks at you, and I've seen the way you look back. That's not memory. That's the truth. His hand found hers, their fingers tangling against the cold iron railing. Then if tomorrow is war, at least I'll go into it with you. She leaned into him, her head against his shoulder, and for a moment the city noise faded, leaving only the rhythm of their shared breath. But high above the city, Damien stood at a window and his penthouse phone pressed to his ear. Tomorrow, he said to the shadowed figure on the other end. Win or lose in court, we move to Plan C. A pause. A thin smile spread across his face. Yes. The bloodline file. Leak it all. The city stretched below him, unaware that its next storm was already written. The courthouse was silent when Amara stepped through its doors the next morning. The silence held weight. Anticipation sharpened to a knife's edge. The marble floors reflected her heels, her shadow stretching long across the polished stone. Ethan walked beside her shoulders, squared, but eyes stormy. Beneath his jacket, his hands clenched and unclenched, as though the muscles themselves remembered battles his memory could not. Behind them, Lila skipped her hand in June's. She wore her favorite yellow dress with tiny sunflowers embroidered at the hem. Amara had argued against bringing her, but Lila insisted, if they talk about me, I should hear it. And in the end, Amara realized her daughter's wisdom often outpaced her own. They entered the courtroom together, a family not forged by circumstance, but by choice. Damien was already there. He sat like a monarch waiting to be crowned, his navy suit immaculate, his tie a precise blade at his throat. His eyes gleamed when he saw them, but his smile was all venom. Judge Valencia entered. The bailiff called the order. The gallery hushed. This court has reviewed the testimonies, the evidence, and the competing petitions, and the judge has begun. Her voice was steady, her words clean of ornament. What lies before us is not simply a question of guardianship, but of truth itself. Ethan's chest rose and fell. Amara gripped his hand under the table. The judge continued, eyes narrowing. Damien Walker presents a claim for temporary guardianship, citing his brother's amnesia and Ms. Johnson's alleged conflict of interest. However, she paused, and the air thickened. The evidence suggests otherwise. She lifted a folder. The palimpsest contract introduced yesterday shows inconsistencies, time-stamped alterations, inconsistent with the date of alleged signing. Further digital forensics reveals the signature was inserted using biometric forgery software. In plain terms, this contract is a fabrication. Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Amara felt Ethan sag beside her, a breath leaving his body like the release of a decade. The judge's gaze shifted to Damien. Such deception undermines your credibility, Mr. Walker. Gravely. For the first time, Damien's composure faltered. His jaw tightened, his fingers tapping the table in a rhythm too sharp to be casual. The judge leaned forward. Custody is not awarded on ambition. It is awarded on love, stability, and presence. And while Ethan Walker may lack memory, he has demonstrated a commitment to his daughter's life that cannot be ignored. Likewise, Ms. Johnson has provided stability, safety, and care. Together, they form the foundation this child requires. Her voice rose decisive. Therefore, this court denies Damian Walker's petition in its entirety. Guardianship and custody remain with Ms. Johnson and Mr. Walker. The gavel fell. For a moment, silence held. Then a murmur swelled, reporters' scrambling whispers filling the gallery. Amara closed her eyes. Ethan's hand covered hers, and she turned to see tears unhidden in his storm-gray gaze. Lila, too young to grasp the intricacies of law, but wise enough to understand victory, leaned across the bench and whispered, "We won, didn't we?" Amara kissed her forehead. "Yes, Starshine. We won." But Damian was not finished. He rose slowly, his face carved into marble fury. "This isn't over," he said. His voice carried enough venom to silence the gallery. "You think custody papers and gavel strikes can erase what I hold? The bloodline file is already in play. By nightfall, the world will question every word you've spoken." He turned toward Ethan, his smile sharp as glass. "And when your daughter reads the headlines and sees her existence twisted in ink, remember, I gave you this warning." Security moved toward him, but he raised his hands with theatrical ease. "Don't worry, I'll leave. But shadows don't leave when the lights go out." He strode from the courtroom, his footsteps echoing like a countdown. Outside, chaos bloomed. Reporters swarmed, shouting questions, waving devices, streaming live to the world. Charlotte, their attorney, ushered them into a waiting car. "Congratulations," she said tightly. "But prepare. Damian's media machine will move faster than any judge." Amara knotted her grip on Ethan's hand, fierce. "Then we move faster still." By evening, the leak had begun. Screens across the country flashed headlines. Explosive bloodline. Claims is Lila Johnson, truly a Walker. Documents suggest child, born of trust arrangement. Legacy or lie. News anchors debated. Analysts speculated. Hashtags trended. In the Blue Ridge cabin, Amara shut off the television. Lila sat cross-legged on the floor, crayons scattered. She was drawing again, 3 figures beneath a storm, but this time the rain was letters, headlines raining down in jagged black lines. Above them, she had drawn a bright blue shield, holding the storm at bay. When Amara knelt beside her, Lila looked up. "Mommy, they can write whatever they want, but we can draw again." Her voice was so steady and sure that Amara felt her throat close. She kissed the crown of her daughter's curls. "Yes, Starshine. We can." The next day, Amara made her decision. "We go public," she told Ethan. "Not on their stage, on ours." He frowned. "You'd expose Lila again." Her eyes blazed. "No, I'll expose myself. And you." Within hours, a live stream was arranged. Not from a podium or a boardroom, but from their home, a plain white wall. Lila's drawings were taped along the edges, like stained glass windows of innocence. Amara sat first, hands folded. "The world has heard enough lies," she said, voice calm but edged with fire. "So here is the truth. When I chose to bring Lila into this world, I chose love over fear. When Ethan returned memoryless and broken, he chose family over legacy. We stand here not as perfect people, but as parents. And we will not let shadows write our daughter's story." Ethan joined her. His voice was rough, stripped bare. "I don't remember the man I was, but I know the man I am. I know that when I hold Lila's hand, I am home. And home is not something you prove with papers. It's something you live every day." They ended with one of Lila's drawings held up to the camera. The storm raining words, the shield protecting the 3. Within hours, the internet erupted. Hashtags multiplied. We draw again. Love is legacy. Shield of truth. Parents posted their children's art. Families wrote stories of resilience. Damien's carefully orchestrated leak drowned in the flood. But Damien had one card left. That night, Amara's security team intercepted an encrypted message. A plan for another break-in not at their home, but at Novaray's headquarters. A theft, a fire, a staged accident meant to discredit her leadership. Ethan read the file, his blood boiling. He won't stop, not until he burns everything. Amara looked at him, her gaze clear. Then we end this, not with revenge, with truth broadcast in daylight. We trap him the way he's trapped us, and so they did. 2 days later, Damien strode into a meeting at Novaray, unaware that every step was being recorded and broadcast live to partners, investors, and the press. His words dripping with menace. If you won't yield, Amara, I'll burn this building to the ground, your company, your name, your daughter's future, ashes. When he realized the cameras were live, it was too late. The world had seen. The trial followed was swift charges. Fraud, extortion, conspiracy. Damien Walker, once untouchable, was shackled by his own arrogance. Amara watched from the gallery as the gavel fell. Ethan sat beside her, his hand entwined with hers. When they stepped into the sunlight afterwards, reporters swarmed again. But this time, the questions were softer, tinged with awe. Ms. Johnson, what's next for you, Mr. Walker? What's next for your family? Amara smiled, radiant, unguarded. We build, not companies, not legacies, a life, Ethan added. Together. Weeks later, Lila ran among rows of sunflowers in the Blue Ridge garden, her laughter scattering like light. Ethan knelt beside Amara, dirt on his hands, sun in his hair. He had just planted the first sapling, an oak sturdy and sure. Have you ever thought we'd get here? He asked. Amara brushed soil from her palms, then touched his cheek. No. But I never stopped choosing it, even when it felt impossible. He kissed her, then slow, deep, not as proof, but as promise. Lila shouted from across the yard. Come on, let's build a castle. Amara laughed, rising to her feet. Not a castle, starshine, a world. And together they walked toward the future, not one inherited, but one they chose hand in hand, heart to heart.